All right, good evening. Today is Monday, February 12th, 2024, and this is Historic Preservation Commission. We'll have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Whidden. Commissioner Beaucamp.
Here.
Commissioner Berg.
Here.
Commissioner Dunlap.
Here.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Keller.
Here.
And Chair Haley.
Here, thank you. All right, now looking at our agenda this evening, have a motion to approve unless there's any changes or additions.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And then we have 3 months of minutes, October, November of 2023, and then January of 2024. Does anyone have any changes that need to be made of those or any comments?
They look good. I would move to approve them.
I would second that.
All those in favor? Oh, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any public comments on items that are not on our agenda this evening? I'm seeing none. We'll move on to public hearing items, which is 1045 Front Street, which is an alteration certificate, and we'll have a staff presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. Okay, so yes, this is an alteration certificate for 1045 Front Street. Can you all read this up on the screen, or should I dim the lights? Okay.
It's fine.
It's fine, okay. All right, so just because this is the first one of the year going before this commission, just want to do a brief reminder overview of alteration certificates, what they are, the criteria. So they're in the section of the code 1536-120. That's the list of criteria. They are required for any work that's on a landmarked property, not just on the primary structure. They have language about being visually compatible with historic structures on the landmark property, and then they have the criteria that's in your staff report in that big table for how to actually review what visually compatible means. Just other note that alteration certificates start as subcommittee reviews, which is the case with this one as well. And the subcommittees, which is 2 commissioners via email or meeting as a subcommittee, can either release or then send the request to the full commission for review. So that's what happened tonight. The subcommittee sent this to the HPC's review. So all of this is in your staff packet, of course, but just to give an overview, 1045 Front Street is actually on a corner lot. So it's on the corner of Front and Short. These are some photos that you can kind of get a sense. Technically these changes are all on the rear of the lot, so on the alley portion. However, because it is a corner lot, those are visible from Short Street. So that has the potential to have a greater impact on the public view of this landmark and this landmark property. You can see on the bottom right, this view kind of gives you a sense of where the structures would be placed. So that garage that's shown on the bottom right would be demolished, and the 2 structures would be on that area, on that rear side of the property. So this is the proposal, the site plan. There are 3 requests. One is to approve the design of a second dwelling unit on the property. The other is to approve a detached garage design, and then to demolish the existing garage. Just to note, I'm not going to get into too much detail here, but I'm happy to answer questions if you do have them. The zoning review is separate from HPC, but it is relevant for you all to know that this is something that you're reviewing and that your time is worthwhile. And so this has gone through, this hasn't gone to a building permit yet. They haven't submitted it for a permit. But I try to do preliminary review of these before they get to you all so that we can know, is this a viable project? So of course, it doesn't mean the permit has been approved in any shape. However, this lot and this zone can support more than 1 dwelling unit. So that's what this proposal is. It would be 2 primary dwellings, which is the historic structure, and then also what it says on the site plan, the proposed new 2-story dwelling unit. That's okay by zoning based on their lot size. Same thing with the heights of the proposed, the setbacks, the lot coverage, the FAR, all of those other pieces. We've reviewed those preliminarily. This will also just give you a general sense, so you can see that this would be the southwest corner is where that two-story garage is proposed to go. That second unit is kind of in the west third of the property, and then you've got the historic structure, and then the view of the historic structure from Short Street and from Front Street. I'll also note just here, because it's the easiest place to see it, that this is a 1998 edition. It was talked about in your staff report a little bit more. Certainly part of the primary dwelling, but not a historic part of the dwelling, at least not for a while, for a few decades. And so that's the portion of the structure that is closest to this second dwelling unit that you would actually lose some of the view of this portion, but in staff's estimation, it's sort of a lower tiered value anyway, in terms of all of the historic resources on the property. So again, I'm happy to answer more details, but this is what was in your staff report, just to notate some of the ways that, as we were reviewing, how this looked both differentiated and then also compatible, which are sort of the two very broad buckets of criteria. The architect is here and has a presentation, and so any more detailed questions about meeting those requirements would be probably more appropriate for the applicants and the architect, but this was sort of how staff reviewed it, looking at the siding, the window design, that open front porch, the materials as well, the mix of wood and metal. So those are all the things that we included in our review. And for the detached garage, this also needs to have some type of differentiation. And from staff's review of this proposal, the garage has sort of it's a little bit less of an impact because it is farther away from the property. And then of course, in this instance, if that second unit is approved, the design for it, it's actually a full unit away. However, it doesn't look historic. It's not trying to, be too cute by half and sort of make it look like it's sort of an original design. It's differentiated in a number of different ways. And also just to note, I think there was a question about this, having a two-story garage on an alley. If it meets the height, that part about whether it's two-story, one-story, it doesn't matter. So it needs to meet the height of 20 feet for accessory structures, but otherwise the two-story piece is allowed. Also just to note as well, so you're looking at the current garage. This was built in 1984, and so it's not meeting that 50 years or older piece. It's also, there's no evidence that, Steve Jobs was in this garage at any time or anything like that, right? So there's no additional evidence that there has social or architectural significance of this garage in particular that we know of, I should say. So with that, staff recommends approval of Resolution 1, Series 2024, which would approve the demolition of the existing garage and the building of the two structures as shown in the plans presented to you all tonight. I also just note, again, since this is our first one of the year, that the alteration certificates that get issued if they're approved by the subcommittee or by the HPC as a whole include Exhibit A's, and those Exhibit A's are the detailed plans that you all are seeing tonight. So if you do approve, they have to meet the siding, the material, everything that they're proposing. We review that from a permit, for the permit as well. So just to kind of give you a sense of how this actually functions in practice. And then if there are any changes, they would have to go back through a subcommittee and then potentially back to the HPC. So as I mentioned, the applicant's here, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
You said that this is going to go through zoning, and our review of it is sort of separate from that. So should we not pay any attention to anything that might be part of the zoning?
Yeah, so basically, they are technically separate, right? The alteration certificate and the building permit process. However, the reason that there's a little bit of overlap is because, you wouldn't want to go through all of this trouble to approve a design that wasn't allowed by zoning. So that's where I've done a little bit of work ahead of time, and staff usually does a little bit of work ahead of time to make sure that it's viable from a zoning perspective, so that we're not having to bring it back to you and say, well, technically now they weren't meeting the setback, so they got to move it back 3 feet. That's what we're trying to avoid. However, yes, to be completely explicit, zoning is not part of this body's review at all. So whether they're meeting the zoning, whether you like the idea that they have a second unit or not, like that, those are all separate. Those are all not part of the HPC's review. What's here tonight are those criteria that are relevant to preserving the historic resources on the property. So making sure that this is adequately mitigating any negative impacts on the historic resources, so that primary unit, and then also that it's compatible, but that it's also sufficiently differentiated. So that's kind of the purview tonight.
Will the applicants be looking for some variances at to conform to the zoning?
They will not. I mean, like I said, they haven't come through the permit process, so the government official in me needs to make it very clear that they have not gotten approval for this design. Okay. However, I have a whole sheet that we go through, everybody on staff does, to review the permit side of things, which is the lot coverage, the FAR, how many units you can have on the property, and the setbacks and the height. And I've done all of that. There are some pieces that need to be clarified, but in all, this is meeting the zoning requirements.
Okay. I hate to always be the one that sounds like I don't like additional dwelling units in the old town, because I definitely do, and we need them for more affordable housing. But it looked like, well, you mentioned a height variance, right? That there's a height limit of 20 feet in the RM district. And yet, I think it asks for 26.
That's for the accessory structure. The second primary structure is allowed to be 30 feet.
But that would not apply as well? Well, that was the second part of my question. The garage with the upper level looks like a dwelling to me. It's got a full kitchen, plumbing and everything. So are you saying it's not a dwelling?
So again, we're totally out beyond what the HPC can review or comment on. However, I'm happy to answer your questions. So first of all, the primary, so here's the site plan. The garage is on the bottom left. The garage is an accessory structure. It has a max height of 20. The second unit, which is shown in the middle, that's the middle structure, that has a max height of 27 because it is a primary dwelling unit per the zoning. And also, your question about whether the two-story garage could have a kitchen, it can't have a full kitchen. So when it goes through the permit process, like that's something that we would review. It can have a bath, and it can be in many forms like a guest suite, right? It's actually I think it's called a guest suite in the zoning. You're allowed to have that. So that's what. Okay. I don't know if that answers your questions.
Well, it looked like it has a dishwasher, refrigerator. Double sink. It looks like a kitchen.
That's all allowed.
It's what?
That's allowed.
Well, then it makes it a dwelling, I think.
I think typically what will keep it from that, just as a side note, is if you have like a cooktop or an oven or anything of that sort, then it kind of moves into another kitchen, which would be another dwelling. Typically, they'll let you put cabinets, just like you would a garage or anything else, and then additionally, you can have a little fridge or a fridge. You can have a microwave. There's a lot of stuff. The cooking unit is usually what pushes it to the kitchen side of things. I get what you're seeing, and okay. I understand what you're saying, but as far as stuff,
because
my knowledge
that cascades.
But that is correct. That's how the Louisville Code works as well. And I also, just before you ask another question, I'm so sorry, I want to be super clear. They're not asking for any variances from the zoning code.
Okay. The what's it called? The Old Town Zoning Overlay, when it talks about the number of dwellings per lot in the RM district, it states that height restriction of 20 feet.
So again, not to be super redundant, but this is all outside of HPC's purview. However, the Old Town zoning doesn't have anything to do. That's not where the dwelling unit requirements sit. It is where the height requirements sit. That's where you get the 27 and the 20. But the zoning for the residential medium density RM, that's in the straight zoning code. That is where you have the allowance for multiple units based on lot size.
Well, maybe I read that paper wrong, or maybe it's wrong on the website.
Absolutely, and I'm happy to answer general questions if it's helpful, maybe at the end of the hearing or something. I'd love to describe more, but I'm also trying to be very careful about what is and isn't within this.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? All right.
No.
So we'll have the applicant And then if you'll just state your name and city of residence for the record.
Good evening, Peter Stewart, Stewart Architecture, and I'm the project architect, and here's the property owner.
I'm Jessie. I'm the property owner.
I think Amelia did a good job describing the project and which slideshow? Sorry, guys. Here we go. Okay. So I'll try not to go over anything that Amelia already went over, but I thought I would just share a little bit of the context. So this is, as she said, this is a corner lot. The historic properties on the left, top left of the left part of that photo. That 1990s addition is this part, and I'm not seeing my cursor up there. Am I doing something wrong, Amelia? Maybe I'm not in a slideshow here. Let's see. Where do you? No, thanks.
There you go. You just have to keep moving it.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's the 1990s edition. You already knew that. This is the 1984 garage. Just a little bit about the garage. It's in, there was, I think, in the staff review and in my own review, there wasn't really any architectural significance with this building or even social significance. The right-hand side of the garage, when you're looking at the front, abuts the alley, and the alley is actually higher than the garage, so the grade is higher than the floor of the garage, so there's been some deterioration and some damage to the structure there. I thought it would be helpful to talk a little bit about neighborhood context. And so if you could see up here on this block, there's what used to be kind of a larger lot, and there's two houses on it now. There's a house here, and there's a house here on the alley. So that's similar to what we're doing in our project, where there's the historic house here, and we're going to add the new addition toward the back, toward the alley. The same type of situation happens here. And I know we're not talking about zoning, but this kind of predates most of our modern zoning code, how these appeared in Old Town. This one up here was built in 1952. This one is 1920. The ones down here in the 1980s, I'm not sure how that happened because that is kind of part of our modern zoning era, but they are subdivided like that. Now, this property is not going to be subdivided. They're not going to be two separate lots. It's one lot. One lot is a landmarked lot, and one lot is a property ownership lot. And there's just the distribution of what we'll see if this project is approved. And again, that's the hatch lines is the 1998 edition. And I know we're not talking about zoning, but but it does limit us in terms of what we want to do. I mean, we're allowed by zoning to have a second dwelling unit, but we can't put it where those other properties put their houses before the zoning, which would have been, kind of one building back here by the alley. Because of Louisville zoning codes, because Louisville doesn't have an accessory dwelling unit zoning allowance, we have to build this within the primary building setbacks, which is this larger rectangle here. This other rectangle in the back is kind of accessory building setbacks. So that's kind of how it ended up the way it ended up. And we did want to do a detached structure rather than an addition on the back of the addition. And we just felt like that would preserve the historic fabric and character of the significant architecture more intact. So again, the setbacks with the new buildings on it. This is the view. I thought it would help to do some kind of really basic views when you're looking at the front of the house from Front Street. So we're standing on front looking toward the west. If you're looking straight on the front of the house, you don't really see the addition or the new building in the back because of perspective lines. Of course, when you start around the corner, you do see it in the rear of the property. It is the new building. It is 2 stories, but it's really a story and 3/4, I suppose. We tried to keep the plate down as low as we could, but to still have habitable space up there. So these wall plates are, I think it was 6'8", or it's not a full 8-foot wall on the second floor. And there it is, kind of in side by side, which I know there was other perspectives of that, or the straight-on elevations with more details on materials in your packet. So that's pretty much our what we're proposing and how it ended up that way. So I'm open to answer any questions. I don't know, Jesse, did you have anything you wanted to say? Okay. Okay. Oh, we're just here to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Regarding design, not zoning?
Are we just internal at this point?
Well, were there any questions for the applicant?
No.
None?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Any comments from the public? All right, so now we'll bring it back for discussion.
I can say, being part of the subcommittee on this one, and being newer again to the board, in reviewing some of the criteria to review an alteration certificate, some items did come up on my side that I thought we should at least talk about. If this were, for me, if it were more of an internal lot, we probably wouldn't be having as much conversation right now. It being a corner lot and myself not being through the alteration certificate process, I felt on my side I couldn't just pass it without bringing it up to the board. So that's where this came about. A couple of items that I saw within there was it talks about the commission must find the proposed alteration to be visually compatible with designated historic structures located on the property in terms of design, finish, material, scale, mass, and height. Then it goes on to say when the subject site is in an historic district, the commission must also find that the proposed alteration is visually compatible with the characteristics that define the district. And that last portion was probably one of my bigger just questions with it. I'm not absolutely against stuff like this because I do believe that it's great that the main structure has been I guess does have a historic certificate with it, and I believe that people do want to do live differently now than they did back then when it was built. There's just a few things in here that just I didn't feel comfortable without bringing it in front of everybody and understanding the process a little bit more from the rest of the board and people with more history and knowledge of the process. There's some other stuff in there. There is some stuff that's a little funky as far as what it says that we're supposed to base everything upon as well. Let me see. Size of the structure, its setbacks, its site, its location, the appropriateness thereof when compared to these existing structures on site. Also, I guess part of mine was the garage was present when it was given a designation. And even though I don't really find the garage part of something that should be part of that or anywhere near as historic or higher priority, it still was part of it. So again, I thought it needed to come in front of everybody. those were my reasons.
So I agree with Josh that it is worth noting for this particular landmark that it's a quarter unit. So it's a big lot. You're with, the design was, took into consideration the zoning requirements and the use of that space. But it is more visible than it otherwise would be if it was adjacent to another property. So maybe just worth considering, by our commission. Just to note again, though, Louisville doesn't have historic districts. So it's, we're really kind of looking at this particular landmark site. And on this landmark site, it's really the house. So really it's considering, do these alterations, the demolition of the garage and the addition of these 2 units, significantly alter the structure itself? I like that it's not attached to it. I think that best preserves that historic structure when it's standalone, and we see it happen both ways, and often very, very thoughtful additions to existing structures, which is great. But it's nice that it's standalone, and I think the applicants did a good job with the differentiation between the 2 structures, the new structures and the existing landmark property building. It is nice to see these photos. It's helpful to see these photos too, to kind of see the different views. And again, from the 2 sides, if you're standing to the kind of south of it and standing to the east of it, there's less impact than if you're standing to the north of it. So I think that's kind of like at least where my thoughts are. But like Gary said and started with, I'd like to see additional dwelling in Old Town. Like, it's nice to see that there's 2 additional units here for more housing for downtown Louisville.
I just wanted to make clear, this is not in the Old Town Overlay District, correct?
No, it is. It's in the
It
RM.
is.
It is in the Old Town overlay,
It is,
correct.
okay.
Louisville doesn't have like historic district designation.
Correct.
So it's, yeah.
Yeah. But it does have some distinct zoning within different parts of that overlay. Yeah.
Well, I think massing-wise, it feels fairly dense, although the use by right is there to do what they're proposing. The 2-story masses on both the second primary structure and the detached garage. I think it's a challenge, one, because of the lot, and I believe it slopes almost 5 feet from front to back. And so the 1.5-story detached garage compared to the original home on the front of the property feels much taller than it actually is. I think the proximity of the 2 new proposed structures appears to be about 5 to 6 feet apart from each other, which feels tight, but again, it's within their right. Massing-wise, roof lines seem compatible. I think the use of materials has been well displayed. I appreciate the open porch, which opens up some of the views that you mentioned of the original home. But I do agree with the previous 2 that it is, being the corner lot, it does make it more visible, obviously, and I need to take a closer look at everything.
Yeah, I think the materials, the design, the roof line, all that are in agreement or fulfill our requirements, but I think the massing and size is hard. The fact that it faces a different way maybe kind of relieves some of that, where it's too distinct. I do appreciate that the original building is completely intact and not touched, which is rare. And so there's part of that. I think on that corner lot, it's just tricky because it is a lot, but at the same time, it's clearly a completely different property structure. And so I think that's the part that kind of makes me think, like, does it actually take away from the original because it is completely separate? Or do we completely tie it to the actual property? You know what I mean? So I think that's what's tricky for me is, yeah, it's just that I would absolutely prefer the structure to be separate, which in this case it is. So
I think that's, again, sort of where I am. You know, the site, when we landmarked it, it's the whole property, right? But really, the property, there's nothing else on the property that there's nothing else there that's landmarkable, even though it's the whole property. It's the structure. And when you kept rereading, like, our codes and our, you know, and kind of like all the verbiage around this, and it says something like, well, it significantly impact in a negative way the landmarks really has come down to the structure. And I don't see that it does. It's just the massing is a lot, but it's all within what's allowed. And again, it's differentiated. I think it's a good point that the entrance, especially to the unit closest to the landmarked house, faces a different direction. So, you know, just trying to make thoughtful decisions because this sort of, not that we do kind of have precedence, but people do look to what's landmarked and how people, you know, what happens with these properties, big properties like that especially.
I will say with the criteria to review an alteration certificate, there's some weird verbiage in there that does seem to strike me. I mean, in part of that, it says when the subject site is in a historic district. So right there, you're kind of, it's not a historic district. I mean, it's an overlay, but it's not a district. So that seems a little bit strange. It'd be nice if at some point we clean that up. Again, you know, the proposed alteration is visibly compatible with the characteristics that define the district. That if you take the tour around the block, you know, on Google Maps or anything else, it's definitely a lot more dense, and it's definitely more packed in, taller. Does it absolutely not fit? I don't think it absolutely does. Goes down that road. I'm just, again, being newer, I thought everybody should at least weigh in on it. I'm not necessarily against it. I just couldn't pass it through on subcommittee.
well, and two, the applicant pointed out the other properties that had that, you know, the dual. However, they're not two-story second homes. They're probably more in line. So that's the other difference, good or bad.
I really don't know if it's, you know, if we have any real say in that whole scale, mass, height proposed alteration is it's an alteration to a, you know,
Right.
alteration to something that was landmarked before, but it's not really to the building. So I mean, again, it's how do you interpret some of these items? So I don't want to lead people down an odd road either.
I have to agree with what most other people have been expressing, which is that, like, the massing and the density gives me pause, but it does seem to fall within, you know, the boundaries of what's acceptable. So.
I'll ask a question because I don't really understand this, not being a professional architect, but is what you were saying is that because there isn't an actual stove proposed, even though there's a dishwasher and a double sink and all that, that this does not become a dwelling unit?
Yes, and
The code, the zoning code states, it makes provision for greenhouses, and they called them guest houses.
yeah.
And it looks like a guest house.
It does if you had, so again, I'm not fully versed for the response to this question, but I can tell you generally how things go as far as architecture and zoning and items of that sort. you can, it's just like having a basement to a house. You could have another kitchenette almost down there, but as soon as you move to a cooking device or anything of that sort, that's when it goes to a, possibility of you renting it out for longer term setup where multiple people would be living there. The way it is right now, I could have my in-laws come stay in my basement with my kitchen, almost, complete kitchenette, and they could live down there pretty comfortably. This is kind of that same setup, but above a garage.
It's unfortunate that the city hasn't moved forward with defining auxiliary dwelling units. I know in the case of Boulder, before they had auxiliary dwelling units, you couldn't have a structure like that and have any plumbing in it. So that's way more restrictive, because you'd certainly want a bathroom in a lot of places without it becoming a dwelling, so.
But again, like, it's not really up to us how they're using that space. All we're worried about tonight is the design. So if, like, the two-story garage is
Yeah.
what we're looking at, nothing about what's actually in the garage, upstairs, or how they're using it, so.
Yeah, so I can certainly defer it to the zoning
Right.
process.
Yeah, so that'd be more of a zoning question down the road if you're interested in that. But for tonight, it's just the size, mass scale,
And height,
how it looks like.
it's over 20 feet height.
The garages,
Well, I think this intermediate building.
well, and that can be. It can be up to 27 feet for a
Primary structure.
Primary structure. So these are two.
I'm probably misreading that zoning document then.
If I may, I want to try to give space to what's happening here, which I didn't mean to overstate that you have no zoning review at all. Of course, like, the questions, if you're asking whether it can be 20 or 25 or 27 legally, like by right, the answer is yes, that can be 27 feet. However, if this is a broader conversation about a discomfort with the massing and the scale, then okay. I just wanted to make sure that that's certainly within your purview to say, this is too tall because it's overwhelming the structure. That's right, okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And I will say one thing that does, when you first look at this and review it, it does look odd, is it looks like it's three different structures. And
There's three different
it does,
No.
well, it is three different structures, but I mean, three different dwelling units
And
in
which
a
would
lot of
not be
ways.
allowed on a 7,000 square foot lot.
And I think that's some of the awkwardness that we have, that gave me pause.
Absolutely.
Question for Amelia. Is the second structure considered a primary structure?
Yes, it is. Yeah, so this would be two primary structures.
Okay, so in regards to massing, which we are looking at, I believe, and I'm looking at the overlay code right now, it says no part of an accessory structure, accessory building, including eaves and overhangs, shall be located any closer than 10 feet to any principal structure, either on the same lot or an adjacent lot.
So that's the commercial size difference.
Okay.
The residential is 5. I'm not sure if you're looking at the PDF or the actual code. One day I'll fix this, but there are some long-standing issues with the PDF version.
Okay.
But yes, so there's a 10-foot distance between accessory and primary or principal on commercial, and it's 5. So that does meet the two gaps that we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I understand what you're kind of seeing and getting at, because just as a general comment on that, usually if you have two primary structures of that sort, you have to have a 10-foot separation between them, or it runs into other fire code, but I believe that's a building code related item that I would just kick the can down the road on that one. Somebody else's review on that.
Yeah, I was looking at the PDF document, so maybe if that's wrong, that all fits.
So with everything stated, I would lean towards not holding this up anymore, but again, I'm open to everybody else's interpretation, because I am junior member of the board.
I think after your first year is under your belt, I think you can be official. So we have a new junior.
No.
No, but that's exactly, I mean, I appreciate that you have, that you did bring it to us. Like, I think it is important for us to all talk about this one. So, yeah.
Can I ask if Keith has anything to say? Oh, hold on,
one
Keith.
second, Keith.
If you have had anything to say, I think we gotta get you up on the screen.
I do.
Okay, please go.
So, looking at this review of the design, just strictly from a visual perspective, you know, making sure it doesn't overwhelm the surrounding neighborhood, I think it fits in fairly well. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I'm sure there's zoning codes that's gonna have to be looked at, and I'm sure Amelia is gonna send it to the appropriate committee to do that. So, but from a strictly a historical perspective, I think it fits in rather well. So I like the design.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.
All right, does anything else need to be talked out? It sounds like we're pretty in agreement that I think because the building is untouched, that is a large part of the kind of preservation of our landmark. And then the new buildings, while definitely taller and on a corner, because they face a different way, they're distinguished and differentiated. And I mean, even the second primary structure is shorter and kind of the 1 3/4 stories instead of 2 full. So I mean, there's some things that they've definitely done to try to minimize the impact as much as possible. So that kind of sounds like our general consensus.
I would make a motion to approve the alteration certificate, which includes 3 requests. The first being the demolition of the garage. The second request to approve the design of the second dwelling unit. And the third request, I think those were out of order number-wise, but to approve the design of the detached garage.
I would second.
And can we do a roll call, please?
Commissioner Whidden,
Yes.
Commissioner Beaucamp,
Yes.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes?
Commissioner Dunlap,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
and Chair Haley.
Yes. Thank you for coming tonight, and staff will be in touch with you. All right, our next items are probable causes, and our first one is 1213 Jefferson Avenue. We'll have a presentation from staff.
Yes, this is a probable cause for 1213 Jefferson Avenue. Before I forget to say this, the applicant is present, does not have a presentation, but is happy to answer any questions that you have.
Perfect.
Okay, so this is our first one of the year for probable cause. So just a brief reminder overview for those new and old to this commission. The probable cause criteria and language resides in Resolution 17, Series 2019. So probable cause is how the HPC approves grants for historic structure assessments. You can get up to $4,000 for a residential property and $9,000 for a commercial property. This is a reimbursement process, but it's non-matching, so it's just up to that amount. If it goes above, then the applicant or the property owner, pays that on their own. But otherwise, often they can pay off the whole cost. And then that resolution references the landmark criteria that is in the code to evaluate whether there is a finding of probable cause that would warrant, giving this amount of money to the property owner. So to talk about 1213 Jefferson, you can see that in general, the form is intact, that front portion. There are several changes that you can't really see actually from these angles. But there is a rear addition and there is attached garage on the north side, so there have been some expansions of the footprint. Likely in the 60s or the 70s, don't have an exact date, but that's when the permits were pulled, so it's likely sometime in that period. But so they may have achieved historic significance at this point, but an assessment would help, give more information. There have been siding and window changes, some of which on the front elevation you can see. And then also the metal railings that you see on there and the posts are, of course, not original. Also, so in terms of the landmark criteria, I'll just talk a little bit about the form of this and how it relates to the social significance. So read about the minimal traditional, which is a popular style between the 30s and the 50s. This is kind of, you could think of like the ranch style as a way to kind of have a lot of homes for a growing population. This is a little bit kind of the precursor to that. And so this structure shows a number of those typical elements described more in your report. But those are sort of like, you can see that it's sort of a boxy shape. It has minimal ornamentation. Again, this was meant to be produced rather quickly for new and young families. And then also this one does have this central entry with these two flanking windows that are still intact. And so in terms of, the population growth, middle class sort of history here, this is tied to European immigration and downtown retail labor. And then also, this is sort of an interesting piece of history here. So oftentimes we get sort of like notable civic folks, and this in particular, sort of a twist on that. I'm not sure how to say her last name, unfortunately, but Roberta Nigan. She was a teacher, very involved in social and civic life, and so sort of a different but very important type of person associated with this house. So with that, staff recommends finding of probable cause, which would approve a grant of up to $4,000 toward the cost of an assessment. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? All right. Any questions for the applicant?
No.
No. Any comments from the public? All right, we'll bring it back for discussion.
I'd be in favor of it. I mean, I don't think there's a big, long discussion to be had here on this one.
Right. Yeah, it meets our age criteria. It has great architectural integrity with minimal changes. Definitely has good social history. So.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree also. It seems pretty straightforward.
Right.
It's an important part of the neighborhood and the
Right.
old neighborhood.
And I think that
works.
time period is important too. So would someone like to make a motion?
I'd make a motion to approve the probable cause for 1213 Jefferson.
I'll second.
We'll do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Whiddon,
Yes.
Commissioner Beaucamp,
Yes.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Dunlap,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Chair Haley.
Yes. Thank you. And staff will be in touch with you as far as choosing a professional to do it and all the reimbursement and everything. So thank you very much. Yep.
Thank you.
Our next probable cause is 733 McKinley Avenue. We'll have another staff report.
Okay, 733 McKinley. There are some photos current, and then the 1948 assessor's photo. The farm and the window locations are intact. There's been some siding and window change, likely in the 1970s here, but in general, relatively unchanged structure, it appears. This is also minimal traditional form, so two of those in one night, and a similar connection, in terms of the residents. This one is a little interesting. I would say the social history on this was like not as full as they usually are, and so that's sort of interesting in and of itself, I suppose, but certainly has a number, of general touch points of different types of employment opportunities in Louisville and around Louisville. But anyway, so staff is recommending approval of this, or finding of probable cause, which would, again, approve an assessment cost up to $4,000 for the property. Happy to answer any questions that you have about this one.
Any questions for staff? Are the applicants here?
The applicants are here, yes.
If you'd like to speak, you can. You don't have to. All right. Does anyone have any questions for the applicants? No? All right. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll bring it back for discussion. I think this one's another pretty straightforward one.
I would agree. I think the only thing lacking is the social
Right.
history, whether there still could be an unknown, but that's the only piece that's really missing.
All right.
Nice to see this property and the other property, both pretty, relatively unchanged properties, intact. So I think it's a good candidate for probable cause.
Totally. And just the context of that time period having two, I just kind of think that's important too. All right.
I got a question from that.
Oh, sure. And if you'll just state your name and city of residence for the record. And if the green light is on, that means your microphone's on.
Hi, I'm Robert Tully, and I live at 733 McKinley. And the question of the social significance, the house next door to us was built in 1912, and our house was built for the children of that residence. So I think there's kind of a story to tell there. And there are family names that go back. The person who lived in our house was from a pioneer family. So it touches in there quite a bit more than you might think.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve probable cause for 733 McKinley Avenue.
I'll second.
We'll do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Whidden,
Yes.
Commissioner Bergkamp,
Yes.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Dunlap,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
and Chair Haley.
Yes. Thank you for coming tonight, and staff will be in touch with you for next, or if you want to get in touch with staff, either way, for next steps. Thank you. All right, and our last probable cause is 800 to 804 Main Street, and we'll have a staff presentation.
Okay, the applicant is here. We'll make like sort of a brief statement presentation and available for questions. But yes, this is 800, I'm just gonna call it 800 Main from here on out. But yes, this is a probable cause hearing for 800 Main. Get a few photos. So this is on the corner of Main and Spruce, just right there. The form looks like it's the same from the sort of like 1930 building. However, there are a number of changes, obviously, to the exterior and to the facade. So it's a high degree of change over time, and how much change over time and whether any of those original buildings are still present is unknown. And just a reminder that this was originally two buildings when it was first built in the late 19th, early 20th century, and then there was a fire in 1926. And so at that time, it looks like this was all combined into one building, and how much of those original buildings remains is unknown, although an assessment could possibly help to sort of piece a little bit of that together. But anyway, so in this instance, it's likely, and I'm speculating here, but it's likely that the 1930 image or structure, and sort of you can see some later photos of what that would have looked like, would be the period of significance here. And so it wouldn't necessarily be to bring it back to whatever it looked like when it was two buildings, but to sort of bring it back to the sort of mid-century look. So an assessment would help us piece some of the questions about what remains, what's possible for restoration, et cetera, since I think restoration would be an important part of this one. However, in general, though it's gone through a number of changes, again, it is in its original form. It is a large structure on Main Street, so that prominence piece is certainly there. And then an assessment could help to determine whether there are any elements of the facade left, more information about what was there in the past. And again, certainly this would be something that would likely require a large restoration project to kind of meet that highest preservation, historic preservation value. An assessment is a good place to try to figure out whether that's possible. So with that, staff recommends approval of a grant for up to $9,000 toward the cost of a historic structure assessment because this is a commercial property, so that cost is higher. As I mentioned, the applicant is here, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Any questions for staff? All right. And if the applicant would like to speak, and just state your name and city of address for us.
Eric Hartranft Associates, Louisville, live and work. And yeah, my office is about a half a block from the site. So I've been kind of looking at this building with Steve Mesplay, Steve in Maryland, for 20 some years. And they keep wanting to do something. And while they were occupying it, it was impossible to come up with a plan to do anything while they were there because they used every square inch of that building. Very successful guitar business. And so now that they've moved to the tech center, we've all noticed the empty building. We're trying to figure out what can be done with it. How do the economics work? When I've seen this photo over the years of the facade and always wondered, what it would take to restore that. And as a matter of fact, I think it was in the early mid 80s, the siding was off briefly. And for an afternoon, I saw some brick down there, and then they got it covered right back up. So I believe the brick is still there. I don't know what shape it's in, but I think we're going to find that there's something salvageable there. That's my hope. We didn't have a lot of brick buildings in Louisville. Gary lives in one. And, we had one down at the end where Lulu's is, which fell down. And we have our new brick buildings, which are so lovely from the 80s here, one we're in and the bank. But I think that it would be nice to show what Louisville was back in the day. And so that the first step is to find out if it's salvageable. And if it is, then we would move on to the next steps of trying to restore it and see what we can do with the actual building. So happy to answer any questions. And I just want to say also that Steve in Maryland couldn't be here, but they are people who have done so much for Louisville that nobody knows about. And when you think about the street fair and you think about the music that's been downtown all these years, you can thank Steve for a lot of that and for the genesis of a lot of what happened, kind of the rebirth of downtown in the 80s and 90s when all of that really took off. So anyway, great people. They really want to do something that's going to be important and good for Louisville, and that's their primary objective, frankly, is to do something that they'll be proud of and that the city will be proud of. So thanks.
Does anyone have questions for the applicant?
Thank you.
It looked like from the report that the history might include a time before the brick. I guess you need the assessment to know whether you would look at a phase that included the brick or preceded the brick.
I can tell you from being inside the building, there is brick walls on the interior of the building currently that you can see, and the interior face has been plastered over, but then you go to the basement and you can still see the foundations and so forth.
Okay, so it's really a brick building.
I believe that what existed in the 20s, 30s, the brick after the fire is what remains today.
Thanks.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. And there's no members of the public, so we'll bring it back for discussion.
When I was reading through everything, I mean, it just felt tremendous curiosity, to see what might still remain and what could be preserved. So I was excited about the possibility.
Yeah, I would agree. I think just the general location merits a look at an assessment to find out what might be there.
I'm pleased that the owners want to move forward with doing something with it.
Since Wildwood moved from actively using that location to the tech center, there's been just a general question among community members of what's next, what's going to happen. So it's encouraging to see you here to, you and the applicants to start exploring that.
All right.
Keith?
Keith, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I really love that building. I've actually been inside it. And I think it's a great addition to the city to showcase some of the architecture. I would recommend, since there was a fire I wasn't aware of, that you get a structural engineer to take a look at that damage as well. But I think it's a great property for our grant. And I would be in favor of approving it.
All right. Anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the probable cause for historical assessment on 800 to 804 Main Street.
Second the motion?
We'll have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Whidden,
Yes.
Commissioner Beaucamp,
Yes.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Dunlap,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Chair Haley.
Yes. All right, thank you. We look forward to seeing the results of the HSA, and hopefully we'll get some interesting finds and new direction for it. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next item that concludes our probable causes, which were exciting. It's a very good start after January. We'll do our discussion and direction. We'll start with Louisville Comprehensive Plan Update from our planning manager.
Just 1 second here to get set up. Okay, so my name is Jeff Hurt, and I'm the planning manager in the community development department. I work closely with Amelia, and I'm the city's project manager for the comprehensive plan update. So my purpose here tonight is just to share information on the project and sort of what a comprehensive plan is and what the process is, and to get some initial feedback from you all. So I've got about a 10-minute presentation just walking through kind of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and I've got a couple targeted questions for you. And just kind of want to sit back and listen for some early feedback from you all to inform our next steps. So a bit about what a comp plan is. So I don't know, I assume there's varying levels of familiarity with what this type of document is, but essentially a comprehensive plan is something that we're required to do by state law as a city and under the city code every 10 years. So it's a city council adopted document, and it's one of the more important sort of policy documents that the city has. And so it's not regulatory in that, like, it doesn't change zoning or change any specific rules on properties, but it is a really important sort of policy foundation. And it's got a lot more teeth, I think, than a lot of people give it credit for. But it's mostly sort of at its core a land use development and transportation infrastructure plan. But as you might imagine, there's a lot of sort of tangential things that interface with the topics in your world. So we wanted to come before you tonight, get some initial feedback. So the typical parts of a comp plan, there'll be a pretty robust, like, existing conditions assessment kind of related to the built environment in terms of growth and development trends, things of that nature. There'll be an important component will be the vision and value statements that come out of the comp plan that need to be heavily informed by community input. So happy to talk about that more, about how we're looking to get that community input. And I'll talk about the other components here. So in terms of the vision and value, so a lot of people view this as kind of like fluffy language they don't know what to do with, but it's really important, sort of like core values type guiding principles type language. It can be used for a variety of things. So city councils can often use it for budgeting and for work planning. It's a really helpful lens to kind of evaluate how the city spends its resources. There will be a land use framework in the comp plan. So that's basically our future land use, sort of aspirational land use and development pattern. And so there'll be a series of maps and policies underneath it, but examples of how this part of the comp plan is sort of actionable include basically, when a private development request come forward to us for like a rezoning or a PUD, planned unit development, things of that nature, we are required by code to evaluate those proposals against this land use framework and this plan. So they tie closely together. It does have some teeth. I do expect out of the comp plan to have a fair amount of changes to our zoning code proposed out of the comp plan. A lot of that originates from this component of the plan. Happy to talk more about any of this. There will be a transportation framework as well. So that's sort of our, like the land use framework, our desired future land use network. So picture a map, with existing facilities, but, dashed lines where we have like aspirational connections. As development occurs on private land, this is the opportunity in the policy document to get those connections, for example. And we use it as a city for a variety of things, for CIP planning, things of that nature. We do have a transportation master plan that was adopted in 2019 that this will build off of, but this will be part of the plan. And then there'll be a range of policy statements around other topics sort of tangential to land use development infrastructure. It's important to note this plan can't be sort of everything to everyone. It's not going to do a deep dive on all of these things, but it will at least touch these things. And it can reinforce policies that live sort of elsewhere. So a lot of these topics sort of have a better home in these like more specialized master plan, council adopted documents, but they should all be talking to each other. And there always is going to be active parallel projects, no matter when we do the comp plan, but a few sort of notable ones are, we are doing our PROST, Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Master Plan update. That's slated to start later this year. That'll need to sync up with the comp plan. The Louisville Downtown Vision Plan, starting to get into where things overlap with your world. That's ongoing as well. We'll need to integrate with the comp plan. And then we're in sort of the latter stages of our first housing plan, which is sort of a housing needs assessment and an action plan. That will also be a city council adopted document that will need to sort of speak to the comp plan. Lots of moving parts, lots going on. Happy to dive in on any of this in more detail. In terms of the topics that just initially came to mind, and I want to hear more obviously from the group tonight about this, is the topics that would interface with HPC in terms of the comp plan, initial stab at things and want more input from you all, like I said. One could be an articulation of community values related to historic preservation. This can be a good sort of solid home for those types of statements that could support the work you're all doing. Anything related to downtown design and development standards could overlap with this document. And then certainly policies within the preservation master plan or elsewhere can be built into this, reinforced through this. And we just look forward to having your sort of lens and the context that you all provide as you're evaluating this plan as it's going to evolve in general. So specific role, in addition to weighing in on those things, we are planning to go to most of our boards and commissions in sort of two waves, one now with just early feedback, project introduction, and then one later this year where we would come back to HPC. You'll have a bit more material to react to at that time. In the interim, there'll be tons of community engagement and public engagement, which we would definitely encourage you to participate in with your HPC or resident hat. But this is one of these projects that's really, really important to have a lot of community input, early especially. And so part of the reason we're going to boards and commissions too is just to raise awareness about it, let you know that we would love for you to spread the word in the community as you start hearing about it. So more people, the merrier, that know about this, frankly. Community engagement, I'll kind of blaze through this, and we can do a deeper dive if you'd like, but we'll have a few community engagement windows, as we're calling them. We're in the first window now, which is more about asking questions of the community about vision and values and some early sort of aspirational stuff. Later this summer, I'll show a schedule, but we'll be coming back with more material for folks to react to in terms of key choices, sort of a framework for the plan, future land use scenarios, things of that nature. And so we'll be doing tons of engagement throughout these engagement windows. I'm not going to go through each one of these methods, but will if you like. Our overall schedule that I should have updated, admit to, this is very close to what it is, but essentially the first quarter of this year is this initial engagement wave window. And then probably starting in July, August, we'll do another wave of community engagement, the idea being warmer months, more people out and about, can get better turnout. So we'll be coming back for more engagement later in the summer. Overall timeline of a project like this, about 18 months. So we're looking for hopefully council adoption like mid to late 2025. And so happy to answer any questions that you have about the project. We just have sort of some guiding questions here to get the conversation started. And then I was going to take notes as you all are discussing, but basically just to get the juices going, what does success look like for you for this type of project? What comes to mind from an HPC perspective? Top 3 issues that you think this project should address from your perspective. And then we're also looking for general feedback on sort of that lens that we should be looking through in terms of other connections and interface with this type of document, with the work that you all do and how it can support it and things of that nature. So with that, that's it for my presentation. Happy to answer any questions and kind of stay up here and field those, or if you want to jump into discussion, I'll hop back on my laptop and I might do some notes on the fly to show you what's being captured.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions before we give feedback? Any clarification or anything? All right. So yeah, if you have one of the questions that stands out more than another, we can start there, or we can just go down the line.
It's definitely a big undertaking. I'm glad that the city's organized to do that now. There are so many things that have been mentioned that could easily be part of this plan that it's a good time to be moving it forward.
Question 3 to me seems somewhat timely, given some of the conversations that our commission has been having or has had in late 23 and early 24 here. And looking at places sort of outside the Old Town overlay. You know, we've had some cases come in front of us, discussions of like development that's moving east, which is just outside the Old Town overlay, but you know, especially with the highway kind of redevelopment project or whatnot, you know, that's an area, there's a lot of agricultural land there, it's sort of a gateway into the city, there's more development going on, so just, you know, something maybe to keep that area in mind, especially with like these zoning revisions and parks and open space and all the different things at play that were mentioned.
The project a few years ago to do an update to the Old Town zoning overlay, some consultants were hired and they did a really good report to the point they got to, but I think with the fires and the pandemic, maybe all that was put on hold, and I'm not sure, but I think just incorporating that policy, because they've done a lot of outreach to the community of what they liked in the historic part of the town, and you know where we should, what direction we should be headed. So there was a lot to start with right there on a particular historic preservation sort of aspect. I suppose in the transportation plan, since there's talk now about getting light rail, and I hope a station somewhere will be considered for that.
I'm going to switch these so Keith can hop in.
Yeah,
but
that's great.
hopefully
Oh.
take a visual snapshot. Sorry. Keith is, one of the commissioners is online, so he can't talk if there's.
Yeah, you know, Gary read my mind. I was thinking light rail also.
Yeah.
I was thinking that would be excellent if we could have that, especially with the crowding that we get during our
Street fair.
concert series in the summer.
I know it's been mentioned in the press, but I don't know the reality of it for Louisville.
Yeah.
Still under discussion, and I think that this could be an opportunity to maybe nudge it a little bit, but so long-term, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can do that and keep the trains from being on the track also at the same time, that'd be really good.
That sounds easy. Yeah, let's do that.
So to the point about areas that fall outside of the Old Town portion of Louisville, just thinking about the life cycle of the town and the fact that there are other neighborhoods now that are meeting the requirements for historic structures, and thinking about how to create sort of a continuity of narrative and value as things age and as other neighborhoods become significant historically.
I want to just put a finer point on this and see if this is where we're going, just to translate it into comp plan speak a little bit. I know we've talked about, like, there are other areas other than what people think of as the historic part of Louisville that are now having their own historic value, their own stories, their own structures that are eligible for landmarking. So part of what I'm hearing is, correct me if I'm wrong, but a desire to have that in mind as the city undertakes a citywide conversation about how things should change in other parts of the city. So let's just use the example of East Louisville. If there's a lot of interest in changing that area, making it denser, that there's also an understanding that there are historic neighborhoods there that want to be preserved. That's kind of a little bit of what we're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. And East Louisville, it's Bella Vista, it's many other places. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Some discussion we had earlier this evening was about auxiliary dwelling units, and I imagine that's part of the overall housing plan with Boulder County that would be considered.
As far as how HBC could be a part of that, you mean?
We discussed it, and a better definition would help us, but I think it's part of the broader affordable housing plan for the county.
Does anyone have the top 3 items that should be addressed? Have any feedback on that?
Know that I have an opinion on the top 3. It's helpful that staff linked the prior comprehensive plan, so I looked that through, and you know, it's comprehensive. Like, there's a lot of different items in there, and I think they're all interwoven. You know, it was helpful to hear you kind of put a little more context that really land use development infrastructure kind of like are the kind of like the umbrella. The other things seem to fall underneath, but right, I mean, all of them kind of work or need to be considered in conjunction with one another. So.
And there's no pressure I don't need to walk away with everyone's top 3. This is just more introductory and initial comment, so wherever you want to take it.
Well, I'm brand new, so that's my caveat starting with this, but the topic that seems to come up the most for me is affordable housing as being like a major thing, and that is woven throughout many of our conversations about how people are hoping to use their properties in the future. So it seems like a very important aspect.
Yeah, historic preservation done right provides more affordable housing. Bit.
And I think, you know, again, as we look to, as the years go on, more areas, more neighborhoods will be eligible for landmarking, and those structures are also aging. So when you look at the not necessarily new development, but infrastructure in that area, land use, new zoning for those areas, for thoughtful decisions, for all the things that we see happening in downtown with the overlay existing homes, moving elsewhere. What else does that entail with infrastructure and the like in open space? I'm thinking, we mentioned East Louisville, but kind of north of South Boulder Road over here, behind kind of that plaza, like that's becoming an older neighborhood too, and that's another kind of area where there's some changes happening to those homes. I think it's going to start happening quicker, so trying to be thoughtful about how that happens with all of these different things that go into that.
Most of the items that I might bring up probably are trickle-down items that would come out of your comprehensive plan. One item I kind of wonder about as we do come into the next 10 or 15 years is and again, an odd comment probably to go with it, but our 50-year old criteria to come in for any sort of historic demo portion. I understand where that's at right now, but I kind of wonder if it's not just a number that somebody picked out somewhere, and at some point, for every 10 years it goes on, maybe that gets bumped out 5 years or something of that sort. That's more of a, tighter portion of what would come out of the plan, maybe. I find that otherwise it's going to be overwhelming, the amount of demo permits that are just not even meant to come through here. I also look at anything in the historic overlay district. As we come into that area, if there is no sort of bonus or any sort of incentive for people to keep historic structures in that area and yet still be able to, I guess, modernize in some ways or do what they would like to with the remainder of their lot, I do appreciate some of the bonus structures and items that we have in that area, just trying to incentivize people to maybe landmark the main historical structure, but yet still be able to do a use by right type of an item further back on a lot. Corner lot tonight was kind of a funky one with that. Those are just a couple of things that I look at all the time, and then do we actually get a historic district out of it or not, and do we really want one or not?
Yeah, I think the preservation bonus is an interesting point, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, as we saw tonight. I mean, it does give folks incentive to landmark their property, but it then allows that extra 5% for the lot coverage and the floor area, which allows a more dense property. And on these corner lots, it really becomes apparent.
It's kind of funny, it's a double-edged sword on that one, for sure. And I would agree, the corner lots are tricky.
Anyone else?
One place where historic preservation really fits in is that vision and values. People who not only live in the Old Town overlay, but throughout Louisville, really I think place a high value on the historic feel of downtown.
Yeah, and just the heart of the town in general, so.
This is a little bit tangential, but because I have young kids, like I know school enrollments are down and things like that for a whole host of reasons, but thinking about the core of the town and sort of how that needs to look moving forward and making sure it's, retained in the ways that we want it retained, so that people are able to live here and raise families here and all of that sort of stuff.
Right, equally, core value is kind of a mixed population, you know, diverse population in all the meanings of diverse, and affordable as well.
Anything else? All right, we heard from Keith, right? You were able to say something if you wanted to, Keith? I think you did.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay.
Well, thank you for your time. This is helpful. You'll be hearing more about this. Like I said, really would love it if you, now that you know what it is, to spread the word as it comes to you. So appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks for coming tonight.
Well, can I
right.
add one item to that? Just as far as if there was anything to go on with something else mentioned with ADUs, maybe in the historic district, if there was a lessened parking requirement or something of that sort for them versus other areas outside of there, which would, I think you should definitely have a parking requirement that comes with it. Just another possible incentive for maybe landmarked items within an overlay district, if it could be worded some way like that. Or maybe even added square footage for an area such as an overlay district.
That's a good point. The parking requirements and it really ties into the transportation plan. A prior mayor was pushing for a lot more electric bicycles and underpasses and the like. And it was expensive, but it's certainly worthwhile to consider those things.
All right, so our next item is our 2024 work plan, part 2.
The aftermath. Okay, so I'm gonna do this in 2 parts. I'm gonna do like a brief moment up here, and then I'm gonna pop over and do what we did last year, which is once you've like adopted the list that you want, we can actually talk a little bit about subcommittees and who wants to volunteer and try to hammer that out a little bit tonight. Okay, so yeah, so adopt list is goal number 1, and then goal number 2 for tonight, if we can get there and y'all are feeling it, is to identify subcommittees, volunteers, and then start to have a little bit of like prerequisite dependency conversation. But I can also do most of the latter half by myself if we don't get to it.
Good.
I don't know how I'm presenting. I can't get it to go forward. Okay, there we go. Okay, so just an overview here of what's in your packet. Those first 3 are sort of like the required, basic functions, and we've completed the training requirement. So of course, if you want to adopt more training requirements, you can, or training goals, but we've met it from the wonderful 2 commissioners who went to the state conference last week. And then this is where we get into, I was trying to pull together what I heard from the retreat and from our last meeting to what are the 2 core projects, and then the ones there at the bottom, 6A through 6D, are sort of commissioner-initiated ones. So just to talk a little bit more about this, so the grant program update, I can get into some more details about kind of how we might organize that if we have questions, but that being a pretty big one, I think we heard from the retreat that there was interest in both doing some looking at structural changes as well as increasing grant amounts. So that interest means it's gonna be like a big project, which is great, but it's gonna take time. And then the other piece is this public landmark resources map update. So that seemed like it was a pretty important one, and also would dovetail kind of nicely with some of the other like grunt work or foundation work that needs to happen for the grant updates. A couple things I want to note. So on the appendix, I printed y'all out copies, and Keith, this is just your memo that you got, what we're looking at in the packet. But in Appendix 1, I just want to be as transparent as possible. So staff's recommendation of items not to include is really based on what I heard, but then also on prioritization. But there are a couple things that I pulled off the list that you might be interested in adding back on. So I pulled off minor code updates because I heard that that wasn't a priority for HPC, so that one's down here. Activating landmarks was actually identified at the January meeting as a priority for HPC. I pulled it down here just because trying to put more emphasis on that grant update given the scope. However, that was stated as something important to the HPC, so if you want to pull that back up, just know it's down here for now. Same thing with the interpretive signage materials update. That's the same thing that was identified as a priority in January. This would be to update like the Acme Mine, some of the interpretive signage. I pulled it down here for the same reason, but just to note. Then the last three, I think, were sort of a consensus that those could be put off to a different time. What else? I think that's basically what I wanted to share to get us started. And so I'll stay up here in case I need to toggle anything, but then once you have an adopted list, I'll go over and we can kind of get more granular on it.
I just have a clarifying question. So in the appendix for the activate landmarks, it says activating landmarks means making them more visible and their stories more accessible to the public. Can you explain to me just how that's very different from number 5, the public landmark resource map update?
Yeah, so I think in general, the way that I have been thinking about the concept of activating landmarks, it's very built environment kind of intervention. So certainly educating the public like a digital map would be a great way to do that and does kind of meet some of what the interests were for activating the landmarks. But maybe this is just in my head and not shared, but the activating landmarks is things that are more like stumble upon moments or potential to do more walking tours or things that are a little bit more actually in like non-digital
tangible.
space.
Or live.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
However, yes, absolutely, the landmark map would achieve some of the goals that an activating landmarks would also achieve.
Thank you for trying to make more understandable to all of us, all of our discussions on our priorities and goals.
I love that stuff, I'm not gonna lie. I'm trying to hear what people are saying and trying to change it back, but yeah. But if I got something wrong, I won't get my feelings hurt, so please, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's good this year too, just to have a separation of kind of more staff heavy versus commission led or initiated, I think is really helpful too. So it's a good distinction.
On that note, and I think it's captured here at the top, but when we finalize the work plan, when you all finalize the work plan, I think what I was imagining was commission initiated was like doing the grunt work on your end, coming to me and saying, hey, can we do this next thing? But obviously, technically, like there's a lot of stuff that as staff or city staff in general, we have to, social media, for instance, like has to go through the city as we learn, that sort of thing. So it's a little bit of a mix, but yeah. If that's the understanding, I think that's what was meant when we talked about it.
But a lot of
January,
it is
right?
them set it, like the subcommittee, like you don't have to be in charge of like setting up a meeting or
Exactly.
all that kind of stuff. Like that just removes you and they come to you when they're ready for you to do whatever you need to do.
Perfect,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, that was my
Is
understanding
that
as well.
everyone's understanding? Just as far as initiated, just so we're all clear. Because I think in the years past, that's what you've done is like, hey, subcommittee, let's meet. And if we can just remove that step, it's just that much easier. Does anyone have any changes or clarifications as far as, I think the first step is just saying, yes, we're good on this, we don't need to change anything.
It may be minor and not that relevant, but the one about updating the HPC bylaws, I read them, at least what I think they are, and they look pretty good. And if everybody just took a look or got them pointed to them, I think we could probably knock that one out in 15 minutes. Might be worth doing to get it off the list. Do you think?
That's in the commissioner-initiated section of the work plan.
Okay. What do you think?
Right, something we couldn't talk about, we couldn't do that in a meeting, right? So it'd have to be behind the scenes, like in a, it couldn't be like in a Monday meeting like this. It'd have to be in a commission.
That we talked.
Subcommittee, sorry, subcommittee.
What would have to be in the?
To discuss it.
Discussing the bylaws.
Well, yeah, so I mean, the way that would work for open government, if that's what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it would actually, the HPC would have to vote that you'd change your bylaws. I'm almost positive council would also have to vote because they had to vote on everything. So, but it could start at a subcommittee, a conversation. If there are one or two of you who are interested, then you get a draft going, then you could give it to me. Then I could say, yeah, that works, city attorney, what have you, then present it as a whole commission. We'd have to navigate how to do that, and I'm actually not sure if that's, I assume you all have the ability to bring things, but also it would be easy for me to kind of be the presenter for that too. But it could start at a subcommittee certainly, and then go from there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and maybe this is kind of what a combination of the two of you, if we even just designated time for us to look at it like in the next month, and then does anyone have anything that they feel like we need to change? Yes or no? And then we can either discuss it and start the change process in our next meeting. Could we do that? Just as far as like saying yes, like we've all read them, and does anyone think there needs to be change, yes or no, and then be done with it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. You could do that in any number of ways. That's totally a way you could do it.
Yeah. So to answer or get back to you, do you think that'd be a better way to knock it off? Is just go ahead and address it right away?
It just seemed, it seemed right.
Like simple, okay.
That it wouldn't really take much work.
Right.
But we do need to periodically update them, I guess, review them.
Sure.
Yeah.
For March, do we have a very busy agenda yet?
We have a couple of items. Let me get back to you, but yeah.
I imagine that some people might read them, myself included, and have questions about what some of it means, and need to, even before making recommendations, ask some questions about those. And with open governance, could we do that with you over email? You know what I mean? And then come with kind of suggestions. I don't want to prolong it, but I also want to make sure that people fully understand what they're looking at and have any questions answered before we're voting on things and making suggestions.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll say, first of all, it sounds like the bylaws are of interest. So we can, if you put them on the work plan, then whoever's on that subcommittee could say, this is our goal timeline. We'd like to bring them in March. Off the top of my head, I would probably say, okay, great. If you have questions, let me know. I would provide those to the rest of the HPC so you all have the same information. And then we'd have to put it on the agenda ahead of time. So that's something we'd all have to coordinate. And I'd have to check if I have to present it or if you all can bring it as a formal item. I think if you were going to bring it as a general discussion, they could probably fit under, put it on the agenda again, but fit it under updates from commissioners. And then once it actually becomes a formal project, then we could get a little bit more technical about who's doing what. But as long as it's on the agenda, that's the real thing that we'd have to coordinate together if you wanted to bring it up.
Does it make it any easier if you make a subcommittee and you just have everybody read over a certain period and then submit any questions you might have to that subcommittee and they can just deal with it directly with you?
Yeah.
I mean, just as a thought of how to streamline this.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I think that's great. And to be totally honest with you, the subcommittee deciding how they want to go about this would be the biggest help.
Okay.
Yeah. Pick a method, and then I'll just be like, that's a great method, guys.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Would anyone like to be on that subcommittee?
I think Gary would.
No, do you want to be?
I could do that because I agreed with them, so it's easy,
Does anyone not agree with it that wants to tackle it with them?
I can be on it. I'm happy to be on the bylaw subcommittee, so we can work together. We work together.
Okay.
We can work together.
We'll do a coloring book on the side.
All right. right, so maybe we can get that knocked out faster then, but it is, just as Amelia hoped for, it is a subcommittee.
Can we get a-
Commissioner-initiated project. Okay.
Get a coloring book page of our 2 subcommittee members. Add it on, please.
Thanks, Josh.
On the back, that'd be amazing. Oh. All right, so any other changes, or are we good with the way this is set up?
I'm
just,
good with it.
in general, think this all works, right? Like the first 3 things we're doing have either accomplished or are doing, right? Well, we will have the May ceremony. People usually help with that just fine. Same thing with the October event. And then great, yeah, Amelia, that you're kind of taking the lead as staff on the grant program. So yeah, I think it's right, just a question of like how to approach the other kind of goals here.
You said you're good with it? Yeah, all right. I think we're good with the, oh, go ahead.
Did Keith have anything to add?
You guys, I'm in full compliance here. I agree with you.
All right.
I think it would be helpful to just have a motion and the whole,
Okay.
do the whole rigmarole,
All right.
get us all invested.
Yep, that's great. So if someone wants to make a motion that we adopt this work plan for the year,
I'll make a motion that we adopt the work plan as put together by staff for this year.
I will second.
and all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so it's our official work plan.
Sweet. Okay. I'm realizing that with Keith online, I won't actually share my screen, but it's the attachment that you all saw. That's the form, right? That's the working form to actually have all the tasks and everything. And I'm just going to write down subcommittees and stuff. That way, Keith, you can jump in as you see fit. Because I think if we take that away, he can't talk, which is weird. But anyway, okay, so the things I wanted to, most of all is actually just to identify the subcommittees. So and then any other things that you want to bring up, but that's, I think, the main thing that I'd love to get some clarity on. So where would you like to start? Do you want to just go from the top to the bottom, Linda, or do you have a preference?
What makes the most sense to you? It doesn't
matter.
Yeah. Maybe just start from the top. So, yeah.
Yeah, so Marty, you did this last year. I don't know if you want to
Be happy to do it again.
comment on it. Okay. And this time I know how to
Let me help.
let you help. I figured it out.
At the document she's talking about, the template. Yeah. Okay. So you're working
Any interest?
on the work plan template. Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah,
I know you can't show it, but I'm just making sure that we're in sync. That's what I was
Exactly.
confused about. Yeah.
Yes, and I can do it for a little bit, and then if we can just help to remember to pull it off. But let me.
Right.
Right. So the list that you just adopted will be the official work plan, that we can look at in December and see if we achieved any of our goals. But this is sort of that working document. So, the grant program update, landmark ceremony, right? And then so the subcommittee would be Marty. So that's what I would be doing. And then. We did this the first half of last year, and then I didn't do it after that. But the idea for just keeping everybody updated on the progress is to have this as an attachment for all of your different, for all of your regular meetings, and then discuss as needed specific items, but otherwise just kind of keep it pretty high level during the meetings.
Okay.
So the next one on there is the fall event, which would be very similar to helping out the landmark ceremony. So helping prepare things like food, if you want any type of speaker at the event, or, coordinating with the museum as well would be a part of this. So just need like a volunteer to help, mostly with logistics and brainstorming, but Slim takes me.
I'm happy to do it.
Did you already do the landmark ceremony for volunteer?
That's me.
Marty.
Oh, you are, okay. I know you did it last year. I think I missed.
I believe if Keith is able to raise his hand ever, we could probably, no, he hasn't raised it. I'm just saying if he raised his hand, that would probably just be an indication that we need to run over there, and I think it would show up on our screen.
Okay.
So,
Oh, he unmuted. I think he was gonna
but
say.
I think there's like a,
He's raising his hand.
Yep, he
yeah,
raised his
now
hand.
he is. He is raising his
Switch it, or
hand.
do I have to switch it?
High-fiving.
You have to go.
Hey, it worked.
Oh. There you go.
Did it work because you raised your hand?
Maybe. Oh, no, he's muted.
Who did that?
Now you're muted again.
No, don't worry about it. You just don't worry about it.
There you go. You're unmuted. Let's try it.
All right, I'm good.
Do you want to say
Okay,
something,
put-
or you're just saying you're good?
No, I'm just enjoying, I'm laughing with you.
Okay.
All right, well,
Good
put your
to
hand
know.
down.
Yeah, if you want to say something at any point, just raise your hand, because we can't see or
I
hear you
understand.
and see
Okay.
everything. So just
You got it.
raise your hand if you have a comment, and we'll make sure you can say something.
Or the little yellow hand that you have up right now.
Yeah. Perfect.
Got it.
Okay.
You
I'm
need
gonna run back.
You need like a remote or something.
Can I make a motion to get a clapper on that thing?
Yeah. All right, so we've taken care of the first three then?
Yes.
Awesome. So the fourth is the grant program update.
Yes, I don't think that this is actually appropriate for a subcommittee because,
Right.
yeah, just it's going to be two
Yeah.
mostly regular meetings. I did put in a number of tasks, and maybe at the end of this, if you're interested and we're all still awake, I'm happy to kind of give you a little bit of insight into how I tried to organize the conversations, just so you can see that your thoughts were captured, but we can do that maybe at the end, if you'd like. Okay. So I wonder who should definitely volunteer for the public landmark resources map update.
All right. Got one. Oh, we got a hand up.
Yeah, I'll help with the map update.
All right. That's interesting. Oh,
Oh.
that's helpful though.
man behind
Great and powerful wizard. Orion.
Okay, thanks, Keith. I'm going to add you to that. So Josh and Keith. Okay. Okay, construction grant signage.
I can volunteer for that too if, yeah.
Yeah, I can do that one also. Because really, it's just a matter of creating something and then it just,
It has to look good.
right. I don't know if I can help with that, but I can make
It sounds
sure
like
it
it
gets,
sounds like it could be a social media
right,
update.
totally. It's kind of connected. Yeah. And then the bylaws, we're gonna,
Oh, that's Gary and Chrissy.
yep.
Okay.
And I'll continue social media. And if I need extra help, but I can just take that one on and.
I failed.
No, I'm just not making you do it again.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then general outreach. And I think this is just general, like, how do we get into the community? How do we engage different, whether it's homeowners or people that already have landmarks or whatever. So, and some of it might just be kind of planning stuff. Like it might not be, but hopefully we can get something. Be awesome to get actually something on the books this year, but.
Yeah, and I think I just wanted to respect that there were so many engagement and outreach ideas at the retreat, and that was a really big priority. So yeah, I don't know necessarily that this one has to be assigned now, unless there are people who really want to do it.
Right.
But I would recommend it, as I wrote in there, that starting to kind of plan some things for Q3, so that maybe there's an event or a mailer or something in Q4 once all willing that we'll have the grant update ready.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I assume this one's open-ended, just to have it on.
Right, and then the subcommittee would generate what ideas you think are the most potent out of all the many.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it is kind of also just to recognize like this was a goal and a priority, but is still kind of amorphous.
Interested in being on that subcommittee, whether it starts now or a little later. And definitely, yeah, getting the list of ideas. I think there were some great ideas in the retreat. So.
Sorry, mute my thing.
I'll volunteer for the outreach as well.
Awesome. And I think too, it's a good thing to say, like if anyone feels like they need to change or whatever, like definitely have that's open also. If you're feeling like you are more passionate about something else or you can't do it for whatever reason, like feel free to come back to us. So these aren't in stone or anything, so. Yeah.
Okay.
And especially for the outreach, that might change as far as maybe someone has a different expertise or something that, so just, yeah, let's keep that open for everyone. Thanks to everyone for taking care of those.
Yeah, it was super helpful. I appreciate it. And then I'll share out sooner than later this list so you know which subcommittee you volunteered for as well. Okay, and then it's totally illegible here, but so I kind of went through, this is about the grant update, sort of how to approach. So I went through all the different stickies, all of my notes, general on the retreat specifically, and I put it into a spreadsheet. And then I kind of this is like too fancy, but I tried to pretend like these were the raw results, right? Kind of what was brought up at the retreat. And then tried to identify ones that specifically had grant implications, right? So that's, again, where I'm pulling those out. So those are the green. And then kind of, these up at the top. I know you can't read them, but they're the tables that you all went around to and put your Post-it notes on. That's where those topics came from. And then I think as I was doing it, I think that the targeted landmark outreach and the more diverse landmark types kind of were the same, well, not the same, but sort of were similar enough that they deserve to be kind of on the same umbrella. So I put those together, took all of these green over here, and then I put them into prioritization and sequencing and tried to think, okay, does it have an implication for changing the grant structure potentially? Is there information that we need to start researching sooner than later? And then are there any prerequisites or dependencies based on some of these ideas? And so using that, I identified some of the things that I thought needed to happen in Q1, Q2. So that's where I got, so anyway, so that's kind of how I got there. So just, my goal in showing you this is just a little back end, like this is kind of, I said I would, and I tried to kind of take everything and then bring it, to a place where we could get started. I'm happy to share this big list of ideas with you all anytime. I'm happy to make it as an amendment to a packet, and just so that you have it. But that's where, using the ones that were red on the right side of the screen, I pulled up, a few tasks for myself and then things that would come up at the upcoming regular meetings. So targeted landmark list seemed to be a prerequisite for a lot of different types of of projects and desires. Cost estimates for full-scale restoration projects, talk to some, commercial specific incentives. So this is sort of where I got that. I got these lists from doing what I just showed you. So I'm happy to get into more detail if you have questions about specific projects you wanted to make sure, ideas you want to make sure were carried, but that's kind of where I started. So I'll worry about this and I'll bring it to you all regularly as I can, so that we can keep things moving, because it's exciting.
That's great.
That's all I have on this item.
Thank you for all that synthesis. That's amazing. You can take all of that brainstorming and make it so organized and give us some focused trajectory. So thank you for that.
Okay, and then general updates.
Yeah.
So I don't know what happened here. Let's see. Okay. So if there's anybody who has any particular questions about this, we can, talk about it afterwards, because I sent out some information, but I just want to let you all know that there is a lot going on, and I'd like to try not to miss opportunities for you to be involved. So the Downtown Vision Plan is one of those. I mentioned this last year that this was going on. It's being run out of the Public Works Department. So there are some planners who are kind of on like the advisory committee for it, but it's not out of our department, for whatever that's worth. But it basically affects public spaces downtown, streets, alleys, sidewalks, parking, any city property. And I think that if you all can either take the online survey or attend an open house, and if you need a link to the survey, let me know, or I can send it out just in general. I think that you all do have really important perspective on this, that it's not going to get captured in a different way. I think last year was under the impression that they would come to some of the boards and commissions, the consultants or public works team, and it's not how it's going to roll. They're doing a different style. So I would just encourage you, if you can, to attend the open house. And it's also one of those where it's genuine open house. You can come at any time during those open hours. So anyway, a few things that we've done so far. This has really been from a staff, historic preservation. So me and then Gigi Yang, who's running the museum, she and I have sat down and tried to put in these, talked about ideas with the consultants for highlighting landmarks, so visual interventions downtown to sort of emphasize the landmarks that are there. It's been something we've talked about. Trying to bring the museum in to downtown a little bit more than it is right now. It's kind of like that northern section, and obviously it's not directly HPC, but it's certainly in our in the historic interest. And then also conversations about wayfinding and what historic references and identity-related references might be helpful and relevant. So that's just for you all to know. There are conversations that relate to history that have gone on already. And then at this open house, and also in the survey that I'm pretty sure is still open, obviously as residents and users of downtown, you're welcome to come. But as HPC members specifically, you could talk about opportunities to highlight historic aspects of downtown, look at what they're proposing and ask questions or give your input on whether there's going to be any impacts on the historic downtown, those pieces, all those things that are really in your wheelhouse and expertise, I think would be very welcome, in addition to just your general input as residents overall. So before I move on, are there any questions about this? I know you've barely talked about
Josh
it.
and I participated with a meeting they had for that vision plan, and actually Randy did at the time, so we provided some input to it.
What was that?
The walking tour with the consultants that were assigned to this.
Great.
that accurate?
Yes. If there was a survey, I don't know where I would find it, so if you did send it, I'd be more apt to fill it out.
Yes, I will send it, and I'm relatively certain. Again, it's not our project, so I'm like kind of finding things out whenever I find them out, but I think it's still open. And then you all have the calendar invite if you are able to come to the open house. Okay, other thing is the housing plan. So again, this is sort of like not directly HPC, but certainly related to some of the topics that are relevant. So the goal here is to bring a draft of the housing plan to council in the coming months. So it has to go through planning commission, so either March, April, May, some type of sequence like that. So just for you all to be aware that that's happening, affordability, ADUs, like all the things, there's a number of things that you all have talked about that relate directly to this housing plan. In addition, having your preservation perspective there. So, if like you have the time, try to engage if you are able, because there are things that will affect HPC that have come up, but even though it's like not directly in your wheelhouse, the siloing is sort of an issue there. But anyway, ADUs and the Old Town overlay, there are implications from this housing plan that could impact those cases. There are a number of reasons why those haven't come back up, but this is one of them, that we haven't had an adopted housing plan. So we've gotten direction from the CMO that they don't want to put the cart before the horse in some of these. Old Town overlay, the design aspects of it, not so much, but some of the other things that the consultants brought up, such as subdivision, such as ADUs, that really does relate more to sort of affordability and housing availability in general. So just more of an update there. If there are any questions, burning questions about the housing plan, I'm happy to try to answer them, but just know it's happening. Okay. And then general updates, no alteration certificates other than the one you saw tonight, and then there was a basement egress window that was added, and that was released. Thank you for your prompt attention to that. And the upcoming schedule?
About the alteration certificate, I noticed that the windows being changed out at 801 Lafarge, just a block up the street here. I mean, it's done right. They're double pane windows replacing single pane windows that look exactly like the ones that were there. Is something we would have approved, but did we get a request for that?
I don't know all of them, I'm sorry. So is that a landmark property or is it not? Do you know?
Oh. I was thinking it was, but I'm not sure of that. Okay.
So in general, if it's a landmark property, yes. Although there is an administrative review for windows being swapped out that you might not see, because there's some that staff can approve. They never happen, but we can sometimes approve things.
Well, remember the adjoining property we went through, I think we looked at that and you decided it didn't fit in the time frame. We didn't have to review it.
Is that the property that you're talking about? That kind of double?
It's the one on the corner as opposed to the next one.
Yes.
Anyway, you might check that.
Great, I will. Thank you. I know which one you're talking about now. Yes. Okay. And then any other questions on these? Okay, so that open house that I mentioned, you have an invite. It's the 22nd, so it's next, like in 2 weeks, I think. And then the next regular meeting, we're back on for the third Monday in the month, so it's March 18th. That is all the updates I have.
Perfect, thank you. All right, any updates from commission members?
I was going to bring up about that 801 Lafarge, and I guess we did.
Perfect.
But then 809 Main over here, I noticed they've taken out the windows and pulled off all the siding. Is that consistent with the grant we gave them?
Yes, so they have, because I think they have to do like a bunch of restoration work on the wood that they're keeping, and so I think that's probably part of why they took it off. And then the windows, yeah, they were full restoration windows, so they ordered them, they had them in storage for a while. Yeah, and eventually, whenever that's done, that's where staff, almost invariably goes out and like checks that it matches whatever the alteration certificate design was. But yeah, that's an interesting one. I grabbed some pictures of that like while it was in process for us to use in the future because it's been really interesting to watch go down.
Yeah. Well, it's a really expensive use of our money, so we want to make sure it's done well. It was basically $450,000. Well, it's a little more than that, but so yeah, we want to have good use of the preservation money for our constituents, I guess.
I will say as well, I know that the applicant, Indy Johnson, did a presentation last year that was kind of like what the status of that project is. He's mentioned a number of times that he's open to doing additional, especially with the new commission. I do think that's one of the biggest, if not the biggest that I'm aware of, there might have been a bigger one, expenditures for a property. I do think it's probably valuable to have somebody like sit down, maybe even a special meeting or something that's like a little more casual than this and that's really digging into what it means to do that scope of work. That way you can better decide for yourselves in the future if that's a valuable, amount of money to spend or not.
It's probably just fine. It's just kind of shocked me to see it all basically deconstructed.
Sloan and I attended the Saving Places conference last week. Was that just last week or 2 weeks ago?
It was like 2 weeks ago.
Okay. I was like, that seems, so 2 weeks ago. And I guess we'll probably get together, maybe synthesize some of the.
I know. I have a lot of notes. They're all right here.
Yeah.
I have to
there's any-
type them up. So
Yeah,
that-
but if there's any major takeaways you wanted to just kind of give?
I mean, it was great for me at this stage of everything to just sit there and be a sponge, and listen to everything. It was a great learning opportunity. I found most of the sessions really good. Some more valuable than others, but I enjoyed it a lot.
Right.
So.
Yeah, this is really good. So we'll kind of type up something more official, but yeah, it was really, really valuable. They did a lot of, trying to think of like the overarching, the theme was like rethinking, rethink, refine, and revive. And so a lot of it was just how do we kind of breathe life into preservation and help just kind of have more people thinking about preservation in a different way that maybe not have, and how to revive our programs and that sort of thing. So, they had a talk on asbestos, which was good, and
I went to one of the sessions on wildfire mitigation opportunities, and they talked about yes, there's ideal scenarios, and this is what you'd ideally like to do, but when you're dealing with historic structures, often that's not an option. Because you can't do the things to the structure that you'd want to do to protect it, so you have to be creative, and some of the information they provided I think was interesting and practical, like things that homeowners could accomplish and stuff like that. So I liked that session a lot.
Yeah, that was good. All right, any other updates?
No, I was wondering who the two were that went.
About what?
I was wondering who the two were that went.
Oh, the
Earlier.
mystery commissioners. Yep, It was us. Yeah. And next year is going to be in Colorado Springs. So if you haven't gone the past 2 years when it's in Boulder, you missed your easy conference. Just kidding. No. It was really convenient, though, having it local for the past couple years. All right. If we don't have any other updates, we can do our adjourn. So make a motion.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you and good night.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.
Recording stopped.